Hey, my name is Brian Anderson, and I'm with Eagle Technologies, and today is part 3 of our ongoing cybersecurity webinar series titled "A Fence Builds a Better Defense." Today, our very own Adam Sabota is going to be discussing blue teaming and really the basic steps to building a modern security defense and common tool sets and frameworks used by defenders and threat hunters. We're also going to talk about some notable hacks of the past and some hacks that have been more recent. As I mentioned, this is really designed to be a 4-part series. This is part 3 today. I believe most of you have attended part 1 and part 2. I have to say those were fantastic, but I'm actually more excited about the content in part 3. And then we're going to move on to part 4, where we talk about offensive security and some of the solutions Eagle offers, most notably around penetration testing and security hardening. So I'll move through these slides pretty quick. If you attended part 1 and part 2, you've seen this already. But Eagle Technologies has been around for 40 years, and really our goal is to create value and build long-term relationships with our customers. We strive to do that a number of different ways. First off, we're heavily staffed with engineers. About 75% of the company are engineers. We actually just hired 2 more recently as we continue to grow. It's also notable that we maintain a best-of-breed product mentality. We don't like that buffet style where you come to us and just pick something. We prefer to do the due diligence, get trained up on it, be experts on it, and be able to articulate to our customers why we believe these particular solutions are more transformative and provide better outcomes. I also think perhaps most notably something worth mentioning is that we staff our own support group. So that means that we're here to help our customers before and after the sale and to provide that cradle to grave mentality that I think makes us a little different. So how did we get here, and what do we really specialize with at Eagle? We've been a backup and recovery powerhouse for decades now. This is something that we're very good at, and we help a lot of customers in the Midwest with. Like everything in IT, it evolves. We spend a lot of time lately talking about immutability with backup and recovery environments. Early on, we realized how powerful integrating primary storage capabilities and data services, most notably snapshots, into backup and recovery, how much that would help our customers. Something I always like to mention is that we actually wrote something called the SAN Toolkit back in the day that helps customers early on leverage snapshots for large restores and clones. And, you know, this is table stakes nowadays, but we were doing it 5-6 years before this was really something you saw in the industry. If you can help customers serve their data effectively and restore their data quickly, leveraging all those data services, naturally you're going to be a BCDR powerhouse as well. We take a lot of pride in helping our customers choose wise recovery time objectives so that we can right-size the environment and spend the appropriate amount of money. And of course, once again, it's all about the outcomes and getting what your business needs. It was actually through those 3 pillars that 3 to 4 years ago, we decided to get into security. I've told the story many times, but over and over, we kept seeing customers that had really good backup and recovery plans. They could bring their infrastructure back online in minutes or hours, you know, based on their recovery time objectives. But that didn't really do much for them if they couldn't figure out how a bad actor had gotten into their environment and they couldn't ensure that the bad actor had been ridded from the environment. So we started to invest heavily into security. We started hiring staff internally at Eagle and started doing a lot of product due diligence. And like I said, that started about 4 years ago. And really what you're seeing today are the fruits of those labors. So just real quick, one thing I always like to point out when we talk about improving a security posture is that Eagle is unique in the industry in the sense that a lot of folks that talk about security don't have any backup and recovery experience. And that is a critical part of recovering your infrastructure when you've actually had an intrusion. That's something that we do all day, every day. We've also gone out there and done product due diligence. A really great example of that is Arctic Wolf. They do managed detection and response, but what really provides value is that they are really good at targeting, helping the SMB crowd that doesn't really have a dedicated security team running around the clock. We do a lot of webinars with Arctic Wolf, so if you haven't heard of them, we've had a lot of success with them, and I would encourage you to watch one of those. As I also mentioned, we've staffed up our own security group here at Eagle. Adam actually leads that effort, and in part 4, as I mentioned earlier, we're actually going to talk about some of those solutions and how we approach those. And then finally, a really great catch-all is our partnership with Credential Security. They have a really deep talent bench, and most notably what they help Eagle customers with is incident response, right? Identifying how the threat got into your environment and making sure that they have been ridded from your environment. And lots of times that's working in concert with us in the backup and recovery space. So Adam and I were talking yesterday. It's really only been, I think, 9 weeks since we started this cybersecurity webinar series, but it is amazing what has happened in that short amount of time. We've seen really large-scale attacks like JBS and the Colonial Pipeline. I personally can't remember a time where I've seen the national news focus so much on cybersecurity. And recently, the president signed an executive order, you can see it here on the screen, where he directly mentioned the private sector and said they need to identify or develop standards, tools, best practices, and other guidelines to enhance security. So really my point here is that your C-levels, this is really top of mind, the federal government, this is really top of mind, and these security woes and improving your security posture, this mission's not going away anytime soon. So no webinar would be complete if we didn't give away some cool stuff. We've gotten great feedback from the last 2 webinars, so we're giving away the same stuff. 4 times throughout the presentation, I'm going to interrupt Adam and spin the wheel of win, and we're going to let folks pick from one of these 5 devices. I think without fail, everybody has chosen one of the last 2. Adam has a pfSense router and he loves it. I have a Ubiquity gateway and I love it. So I understand why those are probably the 2 most popular items. We are going to do something slightly different. If you are one of those 4 winners, we're also going to offer you the ability to accept a free external vulnerability scan. It's quite comprehensive. Adam and his team will perform it for free. And then since you actually had a vulnerability scan, we're going to give you one of those cool "I've been hacked by Eagle" straight out of Compton inspired t-shirts. If you want one of those t-shirts, you can also just sit down with us and have a talk about your security posture and where you can improve. Or every time we get past someone's defenses in a penetration test, we give you a shirt as well. And I think Adam's batting 1,000% right now. So it's pretty eye-opening to have even an external vulnerability scan run on your environment. So that's a cool free giveaway. So why don't we go ahead and get to the introductions. I haven't mentioned Anthony Schweitzer. He's on the call as well. He's going to be helping with some of the back end stuff. Anthony, you want to bring your pretty face up? There he is. Anthony's been with Eagle for 7 years. I myself have been with Eagle for about 10 years. And the gentleman that's actually doing the meat and potatoes of this presentation, Adam Sabota, he's been with Eagle for 8 years. He actually started out as a software engineer, did a lot of the initial implementation as an Eagle Cloud architect for our managed services, but he was really passionate about information security. On the side, he spent a lot of time learning about security. He's been doing this for well over 5 years. He was doing bounties for fun, trying to penetrate other systems. And he, of course, now runs our practice and spends a lot of time as a penetration tester and offensive security researcher. He's an amazing talent to have here at Eagle. And I always find that the self-taught guys that are really passionate are usually the best at their job. And that's really what what fits Adam to a T. So without further ado, Adam, I'm ready to hand it over to you, and you can talk about the legendary hacks of the past.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Let me get switched over here. All right, how's that looking? Good to go? Everybody see that okay?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Yeah, we can see it
okay,
great.
just making sure. All right, beautiful day to talk about some cybersecurity. So we're gonna kick it right off. We talk about some legendary hacks of the past first, and then we'll get right into a giveaway. So, you know, ransomware, you see it in the news, it's everywhere, it's all over. We're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about that today, since there's been some new developments and just interesting, you know, changes in that environment and that landscape. So I wanted to start off talking a little bit about WannaCry, and I'm sure this is one that most, if not all of you, have heard about. This actually happened May 12th, 2017. And it was really unique because a bunch of researchers saw that there was this infection that came out of a network in Asia, and it was spreading via the SMB protocol. So there was actually this 0-day called Eternal Blue that the NSA had in its private toolkit, and it was believed to be leaked by an NSA insider through this group called the Shadow Brokers. And if you played the game Mass Effect, that's kind of where they got that name from. But yeah, they leaked a couple of these exploits, and almost a year later, this WannaCry team, which they believe is attributed to North Korea, I don't know if that was ever confirmed, they integrated these exploits and created a wormable piece of ransomware. And it would just look on the network that it was executed on for any open SMB ports. And using this Eternal Blue 0-day, it would remotely execute code with the buffer overflow, specially crafted packet, and it would spread onto the shares and execute. So this thing started spreading like crazy. It first hit the NHS, hospitals in England and Scotland, and I think it hit nearly 100,000 devices. I think 70,000 was about the number that most people say. So you're talking about MRI scanners, blood storage, refrigeration units, things like that. So as soon as this came out, it started spreading incredibly fast, and the NHS had to halt non-critical emergencies. They were diverting ambulances. So everyone in the security industry was scrambling. And one researcher named Marcus Hutchins, he was actually on vacation. He's a really talented reverse engineer. He got a hold of the binary and he started reverse engineering it. And he found a domain within that binary. So this is a screenshot of IDA Pro. It's a very popular reverse engineer tool, disassembler, decompiler. And as he was going through the code of WannaCry, he saw there was this API call, Internet Open URL A, reaching out to the internet for a domain. And you can see here this arrow is pointing to this strange looking randomized domain. So part of his job and the job of a lot of security researchers who are into reverse engineering is to crawl through these binaries, look for strings, and if you find a domain, you check to see if that domain is registered. If it's not registered, you want to register it as soon as possible and set up something called a sinkhole. So what this lets researchers do is, by registering that domain and setting up a sinkhole, they can start tracking incoming traffic, and they can get a better idea of where these infections are coming from and what's going on. So one cool thing about this piece of malware was this domain that he registered, and he registered it, set up the sinkhole, and then he kept working. Inadvertently, he actually activated the kill switch for the malware. So when new pieces of this malware would run, they would reach out to this domain, and if this domain existed and it had an HTTP response, or maybe it was just DNS resolution, one or the other, the new infections would just bomb out and they would not spread anymore. So really cool that he was able to do that. He didn't understand that's what he was doing at the time, but he got pretty famous for that. And I think it's really cool. This is a good example of a piece of ransomware that differs from ransomware today, because this one wasn't specifically targeting any network or organization. It was just sort of cut loose, and due to the nature of these 0-days in the SMB protocol, they call it wormable. It just automatically started spreading. So, this thing is still out there today. They still have millions of hits on the sinkhole. People just have not patched these vulnerabilities. I think the majority of infections were on Windows 7 computers, but it's just kind of a good example of kind of an automated wormable ransomware that could have done a ton of damage. I think within the first day, this thing had infected 230,000 computers before the kill switch was activated. So yeah, as soon as it gets on a local network, most of these Windows machines are, have SMB enabled on local networks. It's just going to spread from machine to machine. And then with a fixed amount of Bitcoin, they were asking for it. All right, so now we're going to talk about insane hacks of 2021. This is a section where we pick one hack that has kind of stood out in the news, or had a big impact between these webinars. So I wanted to talk about DarkSide. And I'm sure this is fresh in the minds of a lot of you guys. They got famous, or really got a lot of attention for the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. And what's unique about DarkSide and interesting to talk about is they're a ransomware as a service group. And this idea isn't new, but DarkSide kind of has an interesting spin on the ransomware as a service. So they sell this product, and you can buy it on darknet markets, or however you go about obtaining it, and then you can leverage their as a service platform to deploy ransomware and manage that ransomware. So they also offered a 24/7 help desk chat room. If you were infected, you could join a chat room and chat with someone on their team, validate things, negotiate price. They had a phone number you could call for support. They, in some cases, would provide extensive postmortem reports detailing how your organization was breached, which you would get, if you paid the ransom. So I call that a very expensive penetration test. They donate a portion of their collected ransoms to multiple charities like Children's International and the Water Project. And they really claim that they're apolitical. They're not looking to attack critical infrastructure, and just looking to secure high profit margins. So bad actors purchase access to this as a service platform and generate and deploy these ransomware. So this, I think DarkSide was spotted as far back as August 2020, and they debuted this platform on a Russian language hacker forum in November 2020. So he was advertising for affiliates and partners. And since then, it's been behind numerous attacks, targeting manufacturers, law firms in Europe and the United States. And in the bottom left here, I included a graph. This isn't related necessarily to DarkSide, but I thought this was interesting to point out ransomware attacks by industry in the past year and a half. So, we can see government healthcare and industrial equipment is leading, but it's a fairly even spread across the board. And what a lot of these ransomware teams are doing is, they're just motivated by profits. So they're looking for companies that they think, they get into their networks, they look around for a few weeks, see if they can secure a profit, track down where the backups are, where the important data is, they hit that. And especially if you have cyber insurance, you are a big target. If someone figures out you have a cyber insurance policy, they will try to ransomware you, because cyber insurance usually pays out to the ransomware groups. So that's a big motivation for them. Quickly, I know there's a lot of text here, but I wanted to throw this up. You guys can get a few bits and bytes of this. So, here's where they advertise their ransomware platform, and you see they have principles. So they won't attack hospitals or funeral services or government sectors. And then on the right, are some screenshots from infected clients who are talking to them through their help desk. So, asking them for proof or negotiation tactics and things like that. And we're going to touch a little bit on the Colonial Pipeline attack, because that was the big one in the news. May 7th, they had to shut down 5,500 miles of the fuel pipeline, nearly half the fuel supply for the East Coast. After they got hit, DarkSide exfiltrated over 100 gigs of sensitive company data and put those up on their Tor servers on the darknet. Colonial Pipeline ended up paying a 4.4 million ransom to get the decryptor. FBI eventually attributed it to DarkSide a few days later, and the DOJ, as of yesterday, actually announced that they were able to recover most of the funds from this ransom. They were able to seize a Bitcoin wallet. So whether, they infiltrated the DarkSide group, compromised one of their servers, or just intercepted the funds somehow, maybe if they, brought them onto an exchange to try to cash them out, they were able to seize that wallet. And I think, I could be wrong, but last I read yesterday, I think they seized 2.2 million of that. So not the full amount, but a significant amount of funds they were able to recover. So back to that very expensive penetration test idea, in some cases, DarkSide doesn't hack these networks. They don't provide a report. They actually just purchase access to the network. So on these forums, people are selling by the day access into organizations and companies to ransomware teams. And they'll buy the access, get in, poke around, see if it's worth their time and effort. And if so, encrypt your files. CNA Financial is an insurance provider. They provide cyber insurance. They paid a 40 million ransom after a March attack, and they got hacked and their company list got dumped. So, the attackers know who has cyber insurance. They hack the cyber insurance companies, they get the list, and then those are their targets because they know they're more likely to secure a payment from those targets. All right, we're going to dive into a little overview on blue teaming. So if you caught the last presentation, we talked about red teaming, threat adversary tactics, the tools we use for penetration tests, things like that. We're going to talk about blue teaming. And this slide, you saw it last presentation. A quick overview that just gives you a basic idea, right? Red team is offense, blue team is defense. So red team is exploiting your vulnerabilities, trying to penetrate networks, pivot, move laterally, elevate privileges, exfiltrate data, things like that. And blue team's all about protection and damage control, right? Forensics, trying to track down what happens, cat and mouse games. So I have a slide here, and we kind of break these out into multiple slides later on, but I wanted to give an overview here. As a small, medium business who may not have a dedicated security team, what are something your IT admins can be doing or, dipping their toes in the water about to try to get a better grasp on a modern security defense and having some bare minimum things in place. So if you do get hit by attack, the cleanup is easier, the forensics are easier, the incident response is a lot easier. So number one, this is basic. You should be inventorying your assets. So you need to keep track of all the assets that are in your environment, from servers to even individual pieces of software and the versions of that software. And you want to keep those up to date. So like with WannaCry, the Eternal Blue exploit from the NSA leaked a year prior to it being weaponized in that ransomware. And still, the gravity of that attack was appalling. So it's important to have some type of patch schedule in place, not only for your operating systems, but for all the software on those operating systems. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do to help with that. 3 is just basic training, your staff on security awareness. So phishing attacks are the big one right now. The odds of you getting a phishing email with like a file or a document or a macro are kind of low these days. Most phishing attacks are really targeting man-in-the-middle attacks on websites. So they'll put up a fake page or proxy a page like to Office 365, and they will try to intercept your session token there. And that works even if you have multi-factor auth enabled on Office 365, unless you have certain MFA products that are phish proof, as they're called. And we talked a little bit about that in the last presentation. So 4 is kind of the big one. Get a SIM or an EDR XDR product. You can look at MDR, Managed Detection and Response, with our partner Arctic Wolf. But this one is critical because you need log aggregation. You need to be collecting logs from all of your endpoints, and there's so many valuable open source tools and software that you can ingest those logs into and get a ton of value out of right away. So that's everything from mapping behavior in logs, from network logs to Windows event logs, sysmon logs, syslog, whatever you have. These tools can ingest those formats, parse them, and map them to MITRE attack behaviors and identifiers, giving you an easy understanding of what kind of behaviors are going on in your environment. So EDR and XDR is kind of the next level of that. And it's not necessarily a replacement for a SIM, although some EDR products like SentinelOne, they market as XDR, which is kind of bringing the best of both worlds together. So they're giving you that proactive behavioral analysis on software running on the machines, but they're also collecting really in-depth logs. And they do that through user mode API hooks, mostly on NTDLL, to understand what these processes are trying to do and communicate with. So, talking about detection and response is a great first step if you haven't talked about it at all. Like, try to understand or get a game plan together. If you do get hit, what can you do? Like, where can you look? Do you have logs in place? Does your team understand how to access those logs, portals to log into, EDR portals, things of that nature? And, as the topic of this presentation implies, offense can make the best defense. So you want vulnerability scanning and pen testing. There's a lot of open source automated vulnerability scanners you can do, and just hiring penetration testers to validate your security controls and understand where your weakest points are, so you can budget and focus your team and their time around those things. And of course, this kind of beating a dead horse, but it is so true. MFA, all the things. And if you have a piece of software that supports MFA or SSO and you can enable that, you really should enable that. And like I said, it doesn't stop all phishing attacks, but it stops so many other attacks, and it is just such a pain as an attacker if something's protected with MFA.
Hey, Adam, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Patrick in the Q&A asked, and this is something we talked about earlier internally, is with the Colonial Pipeline, the federal government just released the fact that they seized the wallet, one of the wallets at DarkSide. How did they do that?
Yeah, so the FBI has been able to do that quite a bit in the past, and they've done it a lot for darknet markets. They're able to seize the wallet. They've done it for a few criminal groups before, and there's not any specific information out yet that I know of how they were able to do that. But if I had to guess, they probably infiltrated the network or the server somehow. If you have the NSA on your side, they're sitting on hundreds of 0 days, remote code execution in Chrome, you visit a web page on your own, things like that. They have so much power to leverage and infiltrate these groups, and they've probably been working on it for a long time. Alternatively, it could be a situation where these groups transferred some of those funds to an exchange to cash those funds out or trade those funds. And since Bitcoin, the blockchain is a public ledger, you can think of it really just like a giant Excel file that's public of every single transaction ever made. It's possible with the right technology and learning platforms to trace those transactions. So they will try to mask those transactions with things like mixers, where you generate thousands of Bitcoin addresses and send fractions of your funds between them all and blend them all around and try to obfuscate that a bit. But the FBI has really good tech on tracking that. So if it's on the blockchain, chances are the FBI can follow the money and track the money. And once it gets to a place where they may have some influence, like an exchange, they can reach out and they can have that exchange stop those funds and seize that wallet. Because at that point, it's an exchange controlled wallet. So yeah, my bet is it's either they just were able to compromise the DarkSide team somehow, or the DarkSide team slipped up on how they were transferring those funds and they passed through an intermediary that the FBI had some type of influence over.
Yeah. Hey, Adam.
So I read a couple articles about this morning. Krebs on Security, he had one talking about that they were basically tracking multiple transfers of Bitcoin, about 3.77 million, and they had the private key somehow. How they acquired it is probably, to your point, people getting messy and sloppy. And the other thing, I read another article talking about a big sting that happened in, I think, about 100 different countries, where FBI and local authorities actually put encrypted phones with an encrypted app on them, messaging app, that they were able to watch and monitor some of these gangs for the last couple of years. And cryptocurrencies was also captured in that. So I don't know if it was a part of that, but they were basically listening to, unencrypted messages because, they developed the app.
It looks like in the chat, Keith from NASDAR confirmed that he read that they did have the private keys and they found them on a server. So quite literally, the hackers were sloppy with $3 million.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, with the budget of the NSA and just the talent they have there, plus to Anthony's point, a lot of these darknet markets that have been seized, they get compromised by the FBI for 6 months or longer. And the FBI is running these sites for months, allowing people to do these legal transactions so they can collect all this telemetry and data and then do the most damage when they try to bust the vendors. So yeah, that's nothing new for the FBI. They dig in deep and they hide and they wait and they pounce. So
yeah. And to Larry's point, I also want to know what's going to happen with the money. Is it going to stay in the government and lower my taxes, or is somebody going to get it back? Like what happens with that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. So in the past, when the FBI has seized Bitcoin from darknet markets, they've auctioned it off. At least with Silk Road, they auctioned it off. I think right now they're probably just holding it. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. So back to inventory and asset management then real quick. This is an example of, a great place to start building your modern security defense, because you want to start tracking these assets. As soon as you track them, you can track the versioning, the OS, and things like that. So at Eagle, we use Sentinel-1. And Sentinel-1, like many EDR products or other security products, has this concept of a local network scan. So they're constantly scanning our network for what they call rogue devices. And these are devices that do not have endpoints installed on them. So here's an example from a POC Eagle Tech portal that I deployed. And you can see, it's kind of inventorying our devices here. It identifies the OS and software versions. Sentinel-1 will actually look at the version of all installed applications and compare those to any list of known vulnerabilities. And it doesn't really end there. There's tons of solutions. If you want an open source solution that's really designed around networking equipment, Netbox is great. You can find that on GitHub. It's by the DigitalOcean team, which is a really popular cloud provider. SolarWinds, of course, they do this. They do it pretty well. They have a patch management software that's dedicated to Windows patching. And then I also wanted to mention Commvault. I'm sure we have a lot of Commvault customers on the call, but some people don't realize, through some of the built-in workflows in Commvault, you can orchestrate, schedule, and manage your Windows updates. So, you can group out your computers into certain schedules and you can have Commvault manage those updates. So, a lot of people have software that can already do this. Maybe they don't know and they're just not using it, but I highly recommend looking into that and at least considering starting to automate that. You can also use, Windows Update Server, but install the patches. That's one of the easiest things you can do. Work to get that automated, work to get a framework built, identify who's responsible for that in your environment, and make sure those get installed, because that will save you, more than any of the other steps. That's one of the best and easiest things that you can do.
Yeah, and Adam, I'll add, you probably heard us mention Sentinel-1 multiple times. That's another example of our ongoing due diligence. Adam and his team have spent quite a lot of time over the last few weeks playing with Sentinel-1 and trying to see if we think that it has enough value that we'd like to bring it into our portfolio.
Yeah, Sentinel-1 has been really great and interesting to play with. So hope to have some more information to share in the future on, some more of these product evaluations that we're doing. I wanted to talk a little bit about zero trust security. I'm sure this is a buzzword that some of you have heard. And, as a lot of companies are moving to the cloud and Azure and Office 365, you're kind of adopting this concept of zero trust, whether you know it or not. Cloud applications are typically protected behind some layer of SSO, and they have layers of authentication that are configured. So the idea of zero trust is that nothing is implicitly trusted. So we look at like a common SMB today that's probably been around for 20 plus years, right? They might have a pretty open LAN environment. Everything on their LAN can communicate openly. Computers can talk to printers. Somebody can come in and plug in a laptop and talk to other things in the LAN. They can access other servers and internal web pages. And the idea of zero trust is complete encapsulation and putting everything behind a layer of authentication. So you're explicitly defining what users can and cannot access, and you're requiring authentication every time that access occurs. So, things like Azure in the cloud and Office 365, you can really configure those user level permissions to have explicit trust based on what they need to access. This is something that Google has adopted years ago. Microsoft, has adopted the concept of zero trust security internally. And it's all about minimizing risk, but there's a big trade-off because you do have to spend a lot of time setting it up and encapsulating and putting everything behind some type of SSO. So I just wanted to give everyone a little overview of that concept. We won't spend too much time on it, but it's good to be aware of that and, do a little research on your own and see how that concept maybe could apply to you, at least on some of your most secure networks, networks you really need to be aware of what users are accessing things on and lock those down. All right, so now we're going to talk about playing defense with offensive security. This is a really great tool that I want to bring up. So if you have something in your environment already, like a SIEM or log aggregation, EDR, antivirus, or like any one dedicated, security analyst, things like that, Atomic Red Team is an incredible tool. And what it is, it's a toolkit by Red Canary, and it simulates a lot of malicious behavior within your environment. So you pull this down from GitHub and you kind of pick and choose, what you want to simulate. Like maybe you want to simulate a piece of malware that's installing itself to the registry for startup persistence, or you want to simulate malicious PowerShell commands being executed. You can use this framework, Atomic Red Team, to do that, and then you can use that to bolster and improve your defenses. So run these common tests against your environment in production and check your defense tools and make sure you're detecting these things. It's really, really a great tool and resource as a blue teamer to help validate that your defensive controls are working and that you're actually detecting up-to-date and very common threat adversary tactics. So here's
Adam, sorry to interrupt you. Are these tools that you use inside our own penetration testing practice?
I don't use Red Canary for, during a pen test, but when evaluating products like SentinelOne, I use Red Canary to test and make sure that these products are doing the bare minimum and they're actually able to detect a lot of these techniques. So it's like a threat adversary simulation toolkit or emulator. It's an automated thing you run that simulates common malicious behavior, and then you can use that to validate that your defenses are picking that up. And you can get a better understanding of how you find those things within your current tools and logging environments.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Cool. So I just wanted to show a couple examples. There's a ton of these within the toolkit, but you can test defense in some simple one-liners. So they provide these one-liners you can just run, within the Windows run prompt here. And this is going to test multiple things. It's going to make sure you're monitoring the reg server process, and it's going to try to establish a network connection to an external URL, which probably shouldn't happen. And then it's going to try to load a dynamic link library from disk. So some basic things you can detect there. Your defense tool should pick that up as suspicious. And credential dumping, that's really common in a pen test, and especially if you're a target of one of these attacks, they're going to use a tool like Mimikatz to dump credentials from LSAS or try to dump your hashes out so they can be used in pass the hash or replay attacks. So there's a one-liner you can run in PowerShell that will download the Red Canary Cradle, and it will try to dump your passwords with Mimikatz. So this is something that you should absolutely be detecting in your defensive software, or at least ensure that you understand what those look like in your log files. So this is just an overview slide to wrap up Red Team. But here, one of the goals was, they want you to be able to run these tests in under 5 minutes. And the framework is constantly updating and improving to adopt new tools, tactics, and procedures used by real adversaries. So you're getting a really good simulation of adversary behavior on your network. So run this tool, try the droppers, try using, specific things if you're worried about specific behavior, and then check your defense tools. Check your EDR, your AV, your SIMs, your log aggregation, and just make sure like you can see these behaviors in your logs and you understand what those look like. Because anything within this toolkit, you should aim to detect and understand. So it's a great way to just test your current on-site defenses and stay up to date on the latest tactics. A little bit of terminology, if you're not familiar with IOCs, it stands for indicators of compromise. And this is something as a threat hunter or someone on blue team, you're going to be looking for these things. And I talk about them as breadcrumbs left behind. So whenever your network is touched with a piece of software or malicious behavior, there's typically some forensic data left behind. So, hashes of executable files, externally contacted hosts or IP addresses, strings you can pull from the binaries, different phishing campaign names or types, and just strange file IO rates like that. So we're going to talk about some tools that help you capture these IOCs within your environment, and then automatically check the IOCs that they find against a known database of malicious software. And the other point we wanted to touch up on, being focused on offense as defense, is consider getting a penetration test. So there's a lot of different types you can get. A vulnerability scan or a vulnerability assessment is very different from a penetration test. A lot of people or organizations have kind of defined these differently. We go with a 3-box approach. So there's black box, gray box, and white box. And the goal for Eagle when we do these assessments is to act and behave like a real threat adversary using the latest tactics. We use the same software that they use. I think over 60% of ransomware attacks in 2020 use Cobalt Strike Beacon as part of the initial compromise or, lateral movement within your environment. So we use that same exact software at Eagle. We use the same tools, tactics, and procedures to try to give you a very accurate simulation of what will happen if you're targeted by one of these groups. So just going through these real quickly, because we're going to spend a lot more time on these in the 4th presentation. But black box is sort of, we're testing as an external attacker. So we have zero knowledge of any inside information about your company. We just know you have a website on the public internet, you have a scope of IP addresses, and we're going to look at things like, LinkedIn, Google, compromised credentials, websites, blogs, gather all this data we can on your employees and see if they have any compromised credentials on any websites. And then we're going to weaponize that in the form of a phishing campaign if we can't, breach your network externally, which odds are that that's kind of low for most people, but it does happen. So that's a really, we call it comprehensive adversary threat simulation. That's a real good simulation of what would happen if you were hit by some attacker on the public internet who doesn't have any inside knowledge. And then we have gray box where you have a better idea of what you want us to test within your environment. Maybe you don't want us to go through the whole phishing campaign thing and gather data on your employees and look at breach credentials. Maybe you just want us to target a specific app, or you just want us to target your Active Directory employment or deployment. So you give us some prior knowledge and provide us with access that, we assume a breach has already occurred, and we kind of work from there. And then white box pen testing, testing as a developer. So if you have a web app, if you have an internal app, a database that you want to validate your business logic is sound and your security controls are working as intended, you give us access to that application, give us access to API keys, documentation, source code is very common, and we will look through all of that and validate that those security controls make sense as an external party. And we'll look for things as a team with software engineering backgrounds. We look for things that we think we can exploit, break the business logic on, or just break the security controls. Okay, so let's touch on some Active Directory stuff, because this is really important. And when we do internal pen tests, this is what we spend the most time on. It's what we get the most vulnerabilities out of, and just dealing with general misconfigurations. So kind of a big bullet list here, but going over some things in general. Separate your user and admin account privileges. If you're an admin, you don't need to use your admin account on everything you're doing. Try to just use a standard user account. And if you need to run something as admin, right-click, run as, authenticate with your admin domain credentials, or just log in 2 boxes you need to as your admin and log right back out. It's a problem if you use your admin account day to day and you just RDP into boxes and leave that RDP session active, or maybe you log into a box and switch user and that session is active. Because if that box gets compromised and there's a domain admin that has an active session on that box, it is absolutely trivial and easy to dump their hash from memory with a tool like Mimikatz. And now the attacker has domain admin. So separating those is really big and easy to do. Use GPO to enforce your password complexity and account lockouts. You should have a strict account lockout policy, and you should be enforcing password complexities of at least 15 characters with special characters, upper, lower, numbers, things like that. One thing that's worth looking into is App Locker for whitelisting. It's built into Windows. You can configure that. You can set whitelisted applications that your employees are allowed to run. Someone in sales with a laptop probably doesn't need PowerShell. So disable PowerShell for people who don't need it and will never use it, because PowerShell is one of the first things that an attacker is going to leverage for host and domain reconnaissance, and also for privilege escalation and moving laterally. You want to implement sysmon logging on all your event logs. So one thing you should really consider doing right away is look up sysmon by sysinternals. It's a Microsoft utility. You install it with a profile on your Windows machines, and it will start logging very verbose data to the Windows event logs. Things like new processes being created, a process that tries to inject code in another process, a process that resolves a domain and accesses a malicious domain, processes that create files, delete files, rename files. So you get all this low-level data for free with sysmon that you can ingest into these tools that we're going to talk about really quick, map them to MITRE attack behaviors, and get some value out of there. Look at GPO to automatically purge your old AD logon sessions. Like I said before, with the separate user and admin, you don't want admin accounts to remain logged into machines for long periods of time, and you don't want to forget that an account is logged in and you have a session somewhere, because that's a big liability for you and makes it easy for that account hash to get hijacked and your domain admin to become completely compromised. Create dummy accounts. I bolded that one. It's super easy. Just go into Active Directory and make fake accounts. Make fake users with real email addresses, and then just go in the AD properties window and set a schedule and deny logon. So give them domain admin, but deny them from ever being able to log in, and set up monitoring on those. So, if your network ever gets breached, they're going to crawl through your AD, they're going to find domain admins, and they're going to try password spraying against them or authenticating as them. And you can get an alert right away, and that can save you a lot of headache later. You can catch a breach pretty quick. So dummy accounts are great. They're super easy to do. In modern organizations, if you're not relying on legacy software, try to use Kerberos for the auth. Consider restricting NTLM off, because that just makes it so much easier to hijack permissions and hashes from memory. And then, basic stuff, this is kind of old stuff, but if you're using service principal names on any account, have a secure password set, and don't disable Kerberos pre-auth, because that just makes it easy for us to crack your hashes offline. And another thing I want to talk about really quick is canary tokens. This is really cool. Check out this website. You can generate things like Word documents that will ping you if someone opens them. So it's like a honeypot generator, and there's 10s or 20 of different types of things you can generate. But generate some of these honeypots, set up an email alert, and drop these around in your environment. Like, do you have a secure accounting share or finance share, something super restricted? Drop one of these files on there, and if someone opens it, you'll get a ping back. And it's just basic, easy stuff you can do that gives you a heads up and lets you realize something kind of fishy could be going on within your environment.
Yeah,
So these are,
Adam, I do this at my house. I've got a document called passwords that I keep on my desktop. Of course, it's empty, but it's a canary token, so it'll let me know if I ever get infiltrated at home.
yeah, I mean, and it's so easy to do, and the value you get out of it, can potentially save you so much time and money. So really easy to set up stuff like this. And this and the dummy accounts are super easy. And if you have the monitoring configured, you can get a lot of value out of that. And we're going to quickly go through some of these open source tools. So if you guys don't have anything in place today, or you do, and you just, you want to play around, you're open to playing around with some of these tools, there's a couple really great ones you should look at right away. So if you don't have log aggregation in your environment, if you don't have a SIM, Elasticsearch, Kibana, Splunk, Graylog, whatever, consider downloading and trying out SecurityOnion. It's this suite. It's a combination of a bunch of different pieces of software. It includes the software called Waza, which is an open source SIM and log aggregation agent. And it pulls data, it pulls data not only from Windows endpoints and event logs, sysmon logs, but also, from NetFlow logging. So you can have it open an adapter on wherever you deploy it in promiscuous mode, and it will sniff all the traffic on your network, sort of like Wireshark, does PCAP as well. And it will look at your network traffic if you're reaching out to any known bad domains, but it goes a step further. And with Zeek and other tools, it can look at the protocol communication and identify things like known ransomware beacons phoning home, or Cobalt Strike beacons and things of that nature. So 100% free, open source, check it out. You can spin it up on a VM and start playing with it. Here's just a quick screenshot. They have a hunt interface where you can use this onion query language and kind of aggregate and combine your different log sources from the different event modules and do some basic queries on there. You see it also comes with different pieces of software here, like Kibana is that Elasticsearch database that gives you those pretty reports. Grafana does the same thing. CyberChef is just a toolkit for cryptography and encryption and different types of recipes you can do to, mangle and massage data. Then there's Playbook, which is like a series of known bad actor playbooks that it's going to look at, download, keep up to date, and compare against behaviors within your environment.
Hey, Adam, I have
Yep.
a couple questions that have come in. Can you comment on how SecurityOnion compares to Graylog?
So they're both pretty similar, but SecurityOnion is more of a full-featured platform. It's got the Waza SIM and then Zeek, and it does PCAP. It can ingest your network traffic in real time on the network. Whereas Graylog I think is a modification of Elasticsearch. It's built on top of Elasticsearch and Kibana. They use that on the back end. And it's a really great SIM. It also has a ton of traffic ingest sources. So like they have a proprietary protocol you can ingest through. You can ingest through syslog, TCP, HTTPS. I really liked Graylog as a software developer for ingesting logging from my applications. So if I have a web application that's throwing errors, I ingest those into Graylog and then I parse them that way. I know they're moving more into the security space and focusing more on SIM related things with Graylog Enterprise. I don't have a lot of personal experience with that, but I still think SecurityOnion is more of a full-featured platform focused around security. And with all the other tools that it comes with, like the Hive is a ticketing system to track your security incidents and everything. So it's really kind of an all-in-one nice open source tool that's built from the ground up and focused on security. Whereas Graylog started off as just a generic log aggregation platform, and it's kind of grown into that. But I don't know that Graylog can sniff network traffic with PCAP like Wireshark can and SecurityOnion can. So that would be the only thing I'm not sure of there. But
Okay.
I do love Graylog.
Awesome. Larry also asked if, in your opinion, if you adopt an EDR, XDR, MDR, if it can truly replace a SIM.
So you'll probably want to look at products that market it as XDR, extended detection and response. And I think that's what they're kind of trying to do. So if you already have a SIM, and I don't know, I guess it would be a matter of cost and budget, right? But I wouldn't get rid of my SIM and replace it with an EDR. However, I will say I use multiple types of SIMs, and the value that I get out of SentinelOne with the new deep visibility feature is pretty much on par with what I'm getting out of the SIM when it comes to Windows behavioral logging. But the SIM is still super valuable because you're going to be able to ingest stuff like syslog from your firewalls, routers, and other type of equipment that SentinelOne's not necessarily going to have an agent on. So it's not really a true replacement. And I don't know that, yeah, it's unless SentinelOne really opened their platform or an EDR platform and allowed you to ingest from other resources and kind of built out a better SIM-like interface, probably not. But when it comes to Windows security and Windows event logging, the XDR solution by SentinelOne with deep visibility is pretty much on par with what I would get out of Windows-related logs in a SIM.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that Arctic Wolf actually has a feature that you have to pay for, but they can expose the log ingestion so you can search against it. But once again, it's not as fully featured. And unfortunately, Adam, we are running out of time. There's too much awesome content here.
I have like 2 more slides. We'll just breeze through real quick if we can. So, this is a quick screenshot of Wazad that comes with SecurityOnion. This is cool because they have assessments built in, so you can define different things within your environment, different security controls. If you have compliance, PCI, if you want to do NIST, SP 853 security controls, you define those things and they run audits on your machines and then alert you when they pass or fail. Malware detection, this is pretty similar to what you see in most SIMs, right? Like detected a scripting or signed binary proxy execution, it maps it to a MITRE tactic technique, and you can look at things like that. And then the last thing I really wanted to say is, you guys have probably heard of Have I Been Pwned, but sign up for this, use the domain search, add your company domains to this, validate them, and then you'll get alerts whenever email addresses within your company domains have been compromised. And this is the biggest source of how we get into accounts externally. We look at credential dumps, people register on accounts with company email or with their private email that we can map to them through OSCent. And we can use and spray those credentials or variations of those credentials against your organization. So sign up for this, it's free, it's easy. And when you get reports, you might be surprised how many you find within your organization. Develop some type of process or procedure to make those users change those passwords or validate that they're no longer using those.
Yeah, 2 things I might add there, Adam. Sign your parents up, right? So you can find out when your mom or your dad did something stupid.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm getting harassed via chat. They say they want to let you talk as opposed to me rushing you. So if you have anything to add, don't be shy.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of breezed through those last ones, but I honestly would love to do another one of these on defense because I feel like half of the defense tools I really like. It's hard to cram this within an hour, but I just wanted to give you guys a taste, of a few open source tools. Look at SecurityOnion if you don't have log aggregation in place, and deploy SecurityOnion and try out the Atomic Red team and just understand what malicious behavior looks like in your environment, what it looks like in your log aggregation, and you will have a big head start over a lot of people who don't have that in place. At the very least, if you get hit by something and you need to bring in a professional, like an incident response professional, they're going to ask you if you have any logs, because if you don't have logging or forensics, it's going to be so difficult for them to track down how this thing got into your environment and how it spread and what the scope of the affected machines are. So it can save you a lot of time and money just to deploy this thing and let it log in the background.
All right.
This is Gail, and I wanted to note that I did chat out the link to our next security webinar, which is July 13th. So check the chat for that and grab that link and register.
All right. Thanks, Gail. And a couple call to action slides and then we're done. Part 4 of this event that you can register for right now is July 13th. And we're going to talk about some of the offensive security offerings that we have at Eagle. And then, like we said, we really are thinking about a part 5. We also think it would be great to break down the kill chain of a popular what's the word I'm looking for, Adam? A notable exploit that was actually weaponized. We think that would be really enlightening as well. And then go ahead and go to the next slide, Adam. We're also working on some content around Commvault security hardening. We've actually had a fixed price engagement out there for a while now where you can see the price down there. We will actually go through a pretty incredible sequence of steps and checks to ensure that your Commvault security environment has been hardened. A lot of bad actors now have caught on to this, and they are attacking backup environments. You know, we can't name names, but we've seen this within our own customer set lately. So there are a number of things you can do inside a Commvault backup environment to mitigate or defend from bad actors and to keep your backup data sound. So if this is something you're interested in, please reach out to one of your account executives or a nerd like me or Anthony or Adam, and we'll get the ball rolling.